Hi, this is Marie Rowe again. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of my story from Coventry to Hollywood, and I trust you'll also enjoy this second episode. Well, a few months before I left my husband for a new and exciting life, we'd watched the Academy Awards on TV together. Dustin Hoffman was nominated as Best Actor for Midnight Cowboy. One day I'm going to be in a Hollywood movie and I'll be up there accepting an Oscar, my husband announced. I guess it's every actor's dream. As it happens, he never made it to the Academy Awards, but 19 years later, I did. Although I wasn't there for acting, I did hold the Oscar, which was won by Dustin Hoffman for his role in Rain Man. Then, as fate would have it, a few years later, I acted in a Hollywood movie with Michael Douglas and Demi Moore. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I now had to decide what to do with my life. I knew how drama had helped give me confidence as a child, so I applied to Birmingham University to teach theatre in education. However, there was a slight snag in being accepted because I didn't have any qualifications. I didn't have O or A levels, nothing. But because I was 26 and a mature student, and because I gave a convincing and passionate presentation about the need for self-expression in children, I was accepted for the following academic year, which was great, but that meant I had a year to kill. So what was I going to do? Because I wanted to work with children, I fancied going to Switzerland, and I got a job as an au pair for the British consul in Zurich. He was Scottish and his wife was Russian. They'd had their 3 children late in life, a 3-year-old girl and boys aged 6 and 8. And because the diplomat's wife, let's call her Helga, had back problems, she had very little energy for the kids. Consequently, an au pair was a necessity. The outgoing au pair, Lillian, was an artist from London and quite avant-garde. She was great. She didn't say too much about the family. She just wished me good luck. Well, I soon learned that with this family, au pair was more than being a substitute parent, teacher, nanny, and domestic. From time to time, cocktail parties were held at their lakeside house to entertain visiting dignitaries. Since Helga was not usually in the mood for entertaining, I ended up not only supervising the catering staff, but playing hostess. Of course, I blame myself because I was always eager to help. I liked to get involved. When she found out I could sew, she had me darning patches on the boys' trousers and making dresses for the little girl. They clearly had money, but they didn't like spending it. Perhaps this was a Scottish trait of frugality in force. The worst part was that they actually treated me like a servant. They never really talked to me or asked me about myself. I was only there to do a job. Well, many jobs really. On one occasion, Mr. Diplomat obviously wanted to get to know me better when he cornered me in the wine cellar and his hands wandered a bit further than the Chablis. That was enough for me. So I go up to my room in the attic and look out at a wonderful view of Lake Zurich and the beautiful Alps. And I was really miserable. I'd been there 4 months and I knew I wouldn't be able to last a whole year. I made friends with a Canadian au pair, Pat, who trained as a nurse in Canada. Even though she worked for a lovely family with half of my responsibilities, we both realised that we needed to move on. So a few days before Christmas, I gave my notice to Helga. She was surprised and wanted to know why. When I told her that even though I was in charge of her children, she didn't ever ask me about myself, she said, well, Lillian and the other au pairs didn't ever want to interact with me and my husband, so, well, that's why we were distant with you. Of course, at that time I didn't advise her that Mr. Diplomat was actually way too close for my comfort. When I told her I was separated from my husband, she said, "Oh dear, I'd never have hired you if I'd known you were married." I've no idea what difference that made. Well, the next day, Pat and I put on our backpacks and hit the road, heading for St. Moritz, which sounded so glamorous and where we heard we could get work. Oh, such a magical place, especially at Christmas. Everywhere we looked, there were the most magnificent Christmas card scenes. We didn't have much money, but managed to get a room in a pension. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful in finding jobs, but I'll never forget that wonderful Christmas in St. Moritz. It really was special. To cut a bit of a long story short, Pat and I ended up travelling to the French part of Switzerland, where a Dr. Stanley Bond, yes, Bond, had answered an ad I'd put in the Herald Tribune, an international newspaper. The ad read, "English secretary and Canadian nurse looking for work in Swiss Alps." He'd left a telephone number with Helga in Zurich, and when I called Dr. Bond, he explained that he was a Harley Street specialist and needed help with a clinical research study. He asked what we looked like, which should have been a red flag. I said we were both in our 20s and blondes. Pat was also very pretty and resembled Goldie Hawn, but I didn't tell him that. "Oh yes, I think you'll both do very well," responded Dr. Bond. I asked him what he looked like. "Tall, dark and handsome, of course," he chuckled. He assured me that he would reimburse the travel expenses to Lausanne, and his driver would meet us and take us to his place in Crans, Montana. We arrived at Lausanne train station just as it was getting dark. When he saw our backpacks, a very mysterious, tall, thin, sullen man in a long brown coat and trilby, wearing steel-rimmed glasses, approached us. "Dr. Bond?" he said. We nodded, not exactly sure what we were getting ourselves into. He directed us to a red Mini, which wasn't quite the car we expected, and we managed to squeeze our packs in the small boot with no help from the driver. Pat and I sat together in the back seat with some trepidation as we drove higher and higher into the Alps with the silent driver. An hour later, thinking that we were definitely headed for the white slave market, we finally saw the lights of a large hotel ahead, nestled among the snow-covered mountains. The Mini pulled up in front, and the driver lifted our backpacks out of the car and set them down on the red carpet leading to the hotel entrance. Still unsure whether we were doing the right thing, but realising there was no turning back, we got out of the Mini. "Take private elevator to 5th floor. Dr. Bond is there." Then the mystery man drove away. The hotel was immersed in beautiful Christmas decorations inside and out. There were twinkling lights everywhere, and it was very welcoming. We got into the private lift, pressed number 5, and when the doors opened, a little man in his 50s with receding, long, grey, greasy-looking hair was there to meet us. He wore several gold necklaces that reached down to his naked pot belly, but thankfully he wore shorts. This was Dr. Bond. He welcomed us into his 3-story luxurious apartment and told us to make ourselves comfortable while he prepared champagne cocktails. As we sat together on a fur-covered couch, Pat and I looked at one another and knew we'd made a big mistake. Well, you'll get more on this in my next episode, as well as more adventures in Germany. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye.